any talk of Ethereum is an attack on Bitcoin.
We take our responsibility of building a Bitcoin conference very seriously. We actually tried really hard to get the Skull of Satoshi to the conference, and Greenpeace has locked it down. The artist is under a contract, and
don't even set foot on American soil with your booth, man.
But the beauty of this movement, the beauty of Bitcoin is we don't give a fuck if we're broke. 3 Arrows owes me money. So I think we lost 100 Bitcoins.
What a shit show.
Absolutely.
There's been quite a bit of rumor about alleged bad behavior at DCG, including Grayscale and Genesis. And there's been a movement to basically get together all of the shareholders of GBTC as activists to be able to take some power over what's happening at the company. Some of that is being led by David Bailey, who also happens to lead Bitcoin Magazine, Bitcoin Miami 2023, the guy throwing the biggest Bitcoin conference in the world in just a matter of weeks. We talked about all of this and more in this conversation today.
That's dope.
So I want to talk about GBTC because I know that you've taken sort of an activist position with that. For full transparency, and everyone knows I'm an early investor in Valkyrie, and I know Steve shared some of the ethos of how to handle that situation alongside you. What's going on with GBTC now in your mind, and what's your approach to it?
Yeah, so it's a complicated situation. First off, overall, I would say my perspective on the issue, and this is something that we got pulled into, not something that I wanted to be involved in or I intended to be involved in, but we kind of just got pulled into it. What Barry and DCG was effectively doing was not very dissimilar to what SBF and FTX and Alameda were doing. And ultimately, he was taking money out of one entity to feed into another entity where, he had his own shit coin that was able to absorb that money. And then he was able to profit off the top into his slush fund, which is the holding company, and deploy that into venture bets or real estate or whatever. So, the scale of the situation is roughly $10 billion has been lost to the assets that are in the portfolio. They haven't been lost, but what it's trading at is roughly 40% discount to the assets in the trust. And so the scale of the situation is 1 million people are out $10 billion. So we're talking about a situation on the same level and scale as FTX and Alameda. So that's the state of play. The two, to cut to the end, I guess, the two most pressing relevant things that are happening right now. One is you have this bankruptcy occurring at Genesis. That is kind of dates are starting to collide, where basically Barry needs to pony up money to the Genesis creditors that he doesn't have. And unless he's able to strike some sort of deal with them, there's going to end up being a default by DCG, and ultimately a DCG bankruptcy, and the Genesis creditors will become the new owners of DCG. So from the Grayscale perspective, if you're trying to get a deal done to be able to redeem your Bitcoin out of the trust, right now you have to negotiate with Barry. But in that set of situations unfolding, which again, the deadline for that to all unfold is the next month, if he's going to make good on this debt or not. Now we'd actually be doing a deal with the Genesis creditors, who are easier to work with, let's say. So that's one relevant item. The other relevant item is around litigation that's happening. Specifically, there's one lawsuit that's being brought by the Alameda estate, which is now represented by John Ray of kind of Enron fame, and Quinn Emanuel, which is one of the best law firms in the country. And they're basically suing on a variety of fronts. But the thing that's relevant to all shareholders is kind of this fee argument that basically in the trust documents, Grayscale as the sponsor had this duty to monitor and renegotiate fees consistently, regularly, to ensure that shareholders were getting the best rates for everything. And if you look at the trust, the fees are the same today, with $25 billion under management as they were when there was $50 million under management. So this is the most profitable trust in the world. These fees are completely whacked out. And so their argument is okay, hey, show us the board minutes and the meeting minutes and the decision-making process that you guys ran to determine that your rates that you're charging are competitive. Because if you didn't do that, then you weren't in compliance. You breached the contract that you signed with the shareholders. You weren't in compliance with what you said you were going to do for shareholders, and we need to claw back $1.5 billion in ill-gotten fees that you owe shareholders, which is a substantial sum relative to the total. I mean, that's almost 10% of the value of the trust right now. So that is already been filed, and there's kind of let's say looming deadlines for that going to court. And that case will be like most likely resolved this year. So it's like a fairly time sensitive thing. And our kind of focus right now is getting the biggest shareholders educated about the action, talking to them about whether they want to join Alameda in that complaint.
It's interesting. I spoke to Sun and Shine not that long ago, and he made the contention, which seemed compelling at the time, that they were a completely separate entity, and effectively the GBTC itself had nothing to do with Genesis. There was no, so that there was a wall, right? And sounds like that's not necessarily the case in your opinion.
So, what I was talking about with the bankruptcy, that specifically, there isn't a wall between Genesis and DCG. They owe this credit. And, what I would respond back to on that is like, first off, all these loans that were not disclosed to investors, where they're basically allowing firms like BlockFi and Three Arrows and Alameda and Celsius to take shares in the trust and use them as collateral to borrow against, where then they could take the cash they borrowed and put more money into the trust. Every one of those transactions and the loan documents from every one of those transactions had to be signed off on by Michael Schonestein. If you look at the loan agreement from Three Arrows to Genesis, at the bottom of that loan agreement is Michael Schonestein's signature. So how he can claim that he was unaware of what was going on or that was completely separate, he had to approve each transfer of those shares, those restricted shares. He knew exactly who the counterparties were. He knew exactly the details of the loan. So that's just bald-faced not true. The second thing I would say is like, if Grayscale didn't actually care about the problems of DCG, like if DCG's problems weren't Grayscale's problems, then the path for Grayscale to fix the situation is very straightforward. Like they're able to immediately start offering redemptions, offer redemptions on some, prorated amount or some, defined window. Hey, 20% can redeem once a year, and it's going to take 5 years. We're going to lower fees from 2%, which is of NAV, which is absurd, to 1% of NAV, which is still expensive. Yeah, still absurd.
Slightly less absurd. Yes,
but at least investors wouldn't be like suing you for fraud. And like, provide basic transparency and shareholder rights so that you give some governance rights to your shareholders so that they can hold you on, like accountable and be honest. If they did those simple things, they would still be $1 billion company. They would still be making $100 million plus a year in fees. They'd still have 1 million customers in their trust product. Like they'd still be a fantastic company. The problem is that, when you're making $400 million a year in fees, $100 million in fees doesn't cut it for DCG because they need $1.7 billion to make good on all their debts. So like that's where the perverse incentives are coming in. Like DCG needs to rob this piggy bank. And so Grayscale has to operate as a piggy bank rather than operating as an independent business that's trying to do, fulfill their fiduciary duty to their shareholders and their customers. So, that's what I would push back on. And like, they're going to lose the whole trust because they're exploiting it to such a vast degree when they don't have to do that. Just do the right thing by customers. It's pretty simple.
So much to parse there in my mind. So when we were in Dubai at the Satoshi Roundtable, I crashed a meeting with the Three Arrows guys who did not expect me to be there and weren't so happy about it. Because I'm a Voyager creditor. And I asked Kyle a lot of these questions actually. And to be honest, I thought my bullshit meter was kind of flying left and right, but it aligns very much with what you're telling me.
Yeah, I mean, so I've gotten the chance, like, first off, Three Arrows owes me money. So I think we lost 100 Bitcoins in Three Arrows, which I'm not happy about. And like, I want my Bitcoin back. Okay. But I did get the chance to see Kyle in Dubai as well on that trip. And, as we've been kind of battling away at GBTC, he's been someone we've gone to try to ask questions about the relationship between the two entities. And, for better or worse, like I would say the answers that he's given us, It's like he tweeted one time. It's like, hey, if somebody called you up and was like, hey, please take $1 billion from me in a credit line,
That's exactly what he told me when I asked him about Voyager. I said to him, "What lie did you tell Steve Ehrlich to get him to give you $700 million for nothing?" He said, "I swear, like on everything." He called me and said, "I have $700 million. Please take it. I need to earn yield." And it seems like that's what everybody was doing. Like this chase for yield just sent all that money somehow funneling into Three Arrows. But
so like
he had a more aggressive tact than you do about DCG, to be quite honest, to the point where I was like uncomfortable sitting there hearing about it.
I mean, I'm toning it down a little bit, but the DCG stuff is, I think crimes were definitely committed, and there's going to be.
That's what he said. I mean, that was. And he said, I know because I saw it. But I try not to pander and tin hat too much. I guess that will all play out. So, but then I guess the next natural question is, what are you actually doing about it? Right. I mean, we talk about taking this activist view. Does that mean basically hoarding GBTC to become a larger shareholder, to have an impact on the process and effectively be able to gain control?
Well, so, our goals are laid out on the website, redeemgbtc.com. And anyone who's listening to this, go check out the site. It's just a simple site. It has like our 4 goals listed on the site and a sign up form if you have shares to reach out to us to be connected and get more updates, et cetera. But so please go to that site and sign up. Our goals are straightforward. We just want to reduce the discount, and we want this thing to trade at the value of the assets that it's holding. And we think ultimately for that to be achieved, there needs to be a redemption process. And so we think, we've lost confidence that the redemption strategy that Grayscale says they're pursuing, which is this SEC lawsuit and this ETF strategy, is real. We don't think it's real. We think it's all bullshit, and it's a ploy to delay as they extract excessive and absorbent fees. So our strategy right now is just to basically be a central party connected to all the different shareholders. Like, this thing has a ton of shareholders, and before we got involved and put up this site, no one knew who the other shareholders were. Like, you can go on Bloomberg and you can see some of them, but that's a very inaccurate list of shareholders. And so when we put up this site, I mean, we've had 4,000 investors reach out to us at this point, representing well over 30% of all the shares, 35% of the shares. So, and a lot of these shareholders are large institutions with fantastic law firms and lots of resources. So each of them are kind of running their own strategy in parallel of like what they're trying to accomplish. So, we're tiny in the scheme of things. I think we have like a $5 million position or something in GBTC compared to some of these guys that have like.
It's more about connecting the existing ones than buying it up per se and taking control.
Exactly.
That makes perfect sense. And you talked about this all sort of coming due. That's because of the massive, basically, loans within the company that are owed, correct?
Yeah, so that's on the Genesis side, the loans, and then there's litigation that's going to court. And this is like Delaware Chancellery Court. So, Delaware, there's a reason everyone incorporates their companies in Delaware. It has the best legal system for corporate litigation. It's not just the protection side, also like shareholder side. Like, if you want to sue, like they take it super seriously. Things move very quickly. So it's not like suing in New York where you could be bogged down in 5 years of litigation. Like, if it's a straightforward contract issue, like, it's going to be heard and it's going to be decided on pretty quickly. So it's the right court to go to battle in. So anyway, those kind of court deadlines, like cases start getting heard, judges have already been assigned, and that these things get adjudicated pretty quickly if the case is straightforward. But the overall like timeline for getting this trust redeemed, it's however long it takes. Like, if it takes 3 years, 5 years, whatever, ultimately, if we don't get this redemptions turned on for this trust, there's 630,000 Bitcoin sitting in this trust. They're just going to be drained down to zero over time. Like, so, that's 3% of the world's supply of Bitcoin. It's the single largest holding of Bitcoin that exists. So we really don't have any choice but to fight tooth and nail on behalf of shareholders until this thing is redeemed.
What a shit show.
Absolutely.
Speaking of things that are not, So speaking of things that are less of a shit show, pivoting on to happier things, got a pretty big conference coming up.
I don't know if I wouldn't say there's no shit show element involved in that. It's always, when we get down to 20 days away from the conference, it's a full steam sprint to execute and get everything pulled off. But yeah, we are deep into the execution stage, and now we're in the trying not to drop any balls stage of the planning.
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest Bitcoin conference in the world, obviously. I guess Germano told me it'll be the second biggest because obviously bear market versus bull market last year was going to be a bigger conference. Yeah. But I have to imagine that last year became such an overwhelming beast to some degree that you probably a sigh of relief to be able to do it the way you're doing it this year.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, like last year was like, I don't even know how to explain what last year's was like, but we had 26,000 people last year. This year, we're going to be about half that size. So let's call it 13,000. This conference, like talking to the companies, the customers, everyone's broke. It's just like, that's the thing. Like, it's like everyone's broke right now. But the beauty of this movement, the beauty of Bitcoin is like, we don't give a fuck if we're broke. It was never about the riches. It was never about the Lambos. Like, this thing started by people that were broke. You know, it was built by people that were broke. And, you know, like if like the powers that be think that, okay, price goes down and they're going to demotivate this movement, they have no fucking clue who they're dealing with, what type of psychopaths we are. Like, we're all in. Like, they don't understand. We're all in. So, personally, I dig the bear market vibes. I dig the builder focus vibes. We're excited. We have some juicy stuff coming out this week on speakers. There'll be some controversial speakers announced, but it's going to be awesome. And I also, like, I'm sure your listeners have seen some of the drama online as well, but like, we take our like responsibility of building a Bitcoin conference very seriously. Like, we feel like there has to be an event and a platform for the entire industry to come together to focus on Bitcoin, focus on the things that unite us as a community. And, we built this conference. We started in Bitcoin 2019. The block wars had just happened. And, our thought process when we started, it was like, okay, the block wars are over. Bitcoin Cash is not Bitcoin. There's a lot of great Bitcoin Cash, developers and investors out there that ultimately are going to come back to Bitcoin and are good people. They were just wrong on it. They're just wrong. That's it. People are wrong about things all the time. And yeah, exactly. And so we're going to build an event where, like, we don't care what side of the block wars you were on. We don't care if you were pro Bitcoin Cash or pro Big Block. Doesn't matter to us. All we care about is that when you come through the door and you participate in the event, you are totally focused on Bitcoin, like Nakamoto consensus, not hard forked Bitcoin. And like,
not like Bitcoin.com Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. So, but even Roger, every year I make sure I give an invite to Roger to come to the conference, as long as he will abide by the conditions. And, good on him. He tells me I'm not going to abide by those conditions, so he doesn't come. But so we take that seriously though. And so, this year, we've embraced ordinals, we've embraced all parts of the community that, from our perspective, like, is happening on Bitcoin. It is part of Bitcoin. You may not like it, you may not get it, you may not be part of it, but it's part of the Bitcoin ecosystem. And so, we're trying to be the place where, all parts can come together, and then they can consume the ideas that underpin Bitcoin, the Bitcoin OG vibes of freedom, of censorship resistance, of fucking free market economics, Austrian economics. Like, we're trying to take these old ideas and make them consumable for a new generation of Bitcoiners. And so, yeah, there'll be a little bit of drama around that because, not everyone agrees with that take, but frankly, we don't care if people agree. That's our take, and that's what we're going to build. That's what we think the Bitcoin community needs.
Can you give us any, hints or clues as to what kind of massive announcements or guests we might see? Anyone you've announced that you can discuss that people don't know about yet? I saw you going to war with Greenpeace. That was fun.
Yeah. So, we actually tried really hard to get the Skull of Satoshi to the conference, and Greenpeace has like locked it down. The artist is under a contract and yada yada. But like, evidently, we were down to like pay for the Skull of Satoshi and everything to come and bring it to the event. We're pretty sure we're going to get protested at the event by Greenpeace, and they're actually going to bring the Skull of Satoshi on their own dime to protest us. So it's like, okay, like, you're not going to allow us to put it inside the conference, but instead you're going to park it outside the conference for free. Okay, thanks, guys. So they still don't exactly get that, I don't think they really understand what they signed up for, this whole change the code thing. But yeah, there's some big announcements we've already put out there. Like Samson Mao, I think I think he's the one who's speaking with this governor from Indonesia. People do not want to miss this. I think he might have our next Bukele-esque announcement. We have a piece of content that we haven't announced yet. It's going to be on Bitcoin is uncensorable fuck you money. That's going to be a highly controversial discussion. We have all your favorite Bitcoin bulls. We got Michael Saylor here this year, talking about how MicroStrategy is definitely financially solvent, nothing to worry about.
Yeah, I have him on. Yeah, we've had him on quite a few times. It's almost like he laughs that question off at this point. He's like, come on, man. Like, we just went to 15. We're fine. Can you all not see that? The evidence is now like really right out there in the open.
Yeah.
Wasn't he supposed to get liquidated at 27 and 24? 20 was it, man. No chance,
well,
right?
Dude, Miami is his stomping ground. So we always appreciate him being a part of the event. And I think we have a presidential nominee that we're going to be announcing today, but I don't want to share the name. So stay looking at Twitter. Stay looking at Twitter.
to the Bitcoin Magazine account. Is that where we're going to see it?
Sure. With Bitcoin Magazine or the Bitcoin Conference. Or your favorite Bitcoin personality, because I'm sure they're all going to be either cheering it on or booing it as soon as we announce it.
Can't we all just get along, right? The old words of Rodney King. It's like it used to just be Bitcoiners versus shitcoiners, but this year has really been the year of Bitcoiners turning on each other and sort of cannibalizing the community for the reasons you said, whether it's ordinals or
Whenever the price is down, people start feeling salty, and I feel like for those that have been around a really long time. Like you don't see the same level of division, because it's like you realize that like your journey in this industry, it's a journey. It's an intellectual journey, and it evolves and changes over time. You learn new things and you change your opinion on things, and like you realize you didn't know what you thought you knew. Like that's part of the process. But I think there's a generation of Bitcoiners that are new. And, they see criticism of Bitcoin as like something that can't be tolerated, because it maybe they're insecure about Bitcoin's, role, or maybe they're insecure about what's going to happen to Bitcoin. And it's like,
you can say that. I can't. I say that and I get absolutely destroyed. You're allowed to say that. You're in there.
Dude, there's nothing to be insecure about. It's like conviction means bring on the hardest criticisms. Bring on, like, nothing's going to hurt Bitcoin. It's like uncover all the warts and the wounds and talk about it.
It's like talking to myself. I had recently a friend of mine who's I would almost describe as toxic maxi. He might even deem himself as such. I did a panel, and it was some people that were talking about the benefits of Ethereum. And I got these very angry messages from him that it was an attack on Bitcoin. And I was like, no, actually, they're all Bitcoiners. Like, they all like Bitcoin. I said, nobody attacked it. And he said, any talk of Ethereum is an attack on Bitcoin. And I just don't get it, man. Like, that seems like you're coming from a position of defensiveness and insecurity rather than a position of strength. That's like, my opinion on it. If it's not an attack, go ahead.
100%. Bitcoin beats Ethereum on the merits. Like, the more we talk about Ethereum, the more we can just make the case for Bitcoin beating it on the merits. And like the places where Ethereum maybe has a leg up on Bitcoin, like that's not an in perpetuity state. That's just like a current status. So then the conversation is like, okay, well, how do we achieve those things? And, we were on a Twitter Spaces the other day, but together talking about this, but, I fundamentally don't buy that, Bitcoin lacks the ability to do anything any other protocol can do. Right. Like we've battled this out. What we determined from that battle was like Bitcoin's going to get built in layers. There's a certain way to go about development on Bitcoin, but not that like those layers aren't able to achieve the same thing people think they can achieve at these other protocols. So, I think the future of Bitcoin development, the future of Bitcoin functionality, like we're at the the start of human civilization. And it's like, it's going to evolve to such an unbelievable degree. It's like, I don't understand what people are even arguing about. I mean, it's like, it's okay to disagree with people too. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to change your mind.
I was joking just very recently. Like, I consider myself a Bitcoiner because I view everything else as something completely separate. It's my own view, whatever. I'm very passionate about Bitcoin. And I said, at the very least, you have to admit that it's a test net for Bitcoin, because all the things that we're now saying, the point you just made, that Bitcoin will catch up, it will be built here. Well, it had to be tested somewhere else first, right? Because it wasn't built here in the first place. That's A. And B, I came in as a trader because I found like Doge and other complete shitcoins in 2017, and that backed me into being a Bitcoiner. And if I had never found those things,
100%.
I would have never gotten here. Now, listen, I don't think outright that meme coins are good because they're wrecking people, but I think there's a lot of ways to convert people to being Bitcoiners, and being toxic towards all of those people is not the path.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm not saying that there's no place for the toxicity, because I like, you can always point to the extreme examples, and it's like, okay, like Craig Wright, like is a
Yes.
shithead, and like,
Yes.
people like that need to be fucking, gone after. But yeah, yeah, dude, I feel like, everyone wants to skip the intellectual journey, and there's no way to skip it. Like, the intellectual journey is how you build conviction. And I don't want people to get wrecked, and I don't think people, like, we should be intentional for people to get wrecked. But like, getting wrecked is part of the way that you learn what makes Bitcoin unique. I mean, I wish I could skip getting wrecked as many times as I have. There's a saying in Bitcoin. It's your Bitcoinogenesis is not determined by how many Bitcoin you have. It's determined by how many Bitcoin you've lost. And so like, that's, some people, like, maybe Adam Back is born like galaxy brain, like has it all figured out. But for the everyday normal person, it's like they learn through experience. And like, like, I have made every mistake you possibly can. And that's what's brought me to Bitcoin. And to think that, like, you can read a Twitter thread and just skip to the end of the line and be like, okay, I have absolute conviction on Bitcoin. I read something that Michael Saylor tweeted. It's like, no, you can't. Like, that's not how it works. So, I think, Bitcoin is sound money. Bitcoin is, I think, humanity's only hope at building a better financial system. And so it deserves our focus and attention, and it deserves to be pushed forward however we can. But, I don't think we have to look at everything that's not Bitcoin as some sort of attack on Bitcoin or some sort of, threat to Bitcoin. It's like, no, like Bitcoin is Bitcoin. Focus your energy there. Be zen about everything else. That's my view on the matter.
I basically agree 100% with that. I was saying earlier that I was just a consensus, and coming to yours. The one thing I will notice that was glaring was no offshore exchanges advertising anything anywhere. When I walked into Consensus last year, it was like the Binance floor and, like literally everything. I mean, I know for a fact that certain exchanges have told me that, like, their lawyers literally called them 3 weeks, a month before when they had a booth plan and said, don't do anything on American soil. So I know that's problematic for you. I mean, I've talked to Mike, obviously, but like,
yeah,
this is war. I mean, this is war from the United States government, right? Like, don't even set foot on American soil with your booth, man. Like, that's what they told them.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like roll my eyes at it a little bit, because it's like, it's all just a game. It's like, BitMEX can't have a foot in the United States. So they have BitMEX research, and it's like, okay, we're only going to talk about BitMEX research. And, we don't have any customers from the United States. And it's like, meanwhile, people are like on their phone, like VPN on, like logging in. So it's like, I love BitMEX. I'm not saying that happened. That was just a hypothetical situation, but it's just like this big game of like, theoretically, this big game. And it's just, it's so silly. I mean, it's, and, that's like one of the reasons I think, the talking points around, the US government and Bitcoin, they need to change, because like, we don't want to create an adversarial relationship with the government. We want the government to see there being value in having this developed on American soil. And so, like, I'm very bullish on this group, Bitcoin Policy Institute. They just did a summit in DC like last week, 2 weeks ago. It was fantastic. They did a really good job. And they are flipping the talking points back at the politicians, and hey, you want to project American power? Okay, Bitcoin is your tool. You believe in the American dream and the ideas of capitalism, property rights, and freedom. Great. Those are the fundamental tenets of what Bitcoin's about. Oh, you believe in environmentalism. Okay, Bitcoin is environmental technology. And so they're just like developing the academia to be able to make that case to politicians. And I think, ultimately we're going to get buy-in on that view. But this whole kind of like shell game of like, hey, not on our soil. And then it's like, okay, Coinbase
so
is now in the
dumb.
Bahamas. How many customers do you think they have in the Bahamas? A dozen?
As many as FTX apparently had. I don't know. Although there were those people who managed to like get Bahamas FTX accounts and take money out while there was no withdrawals. But I guess that's a story for a different day. You described something earlier that was just really interesting. You were talking about Grayscale and you said that's still $1 billion business, right? I mean, it's a huge business, even if they do everything 100% the right way. I don't know why I want to talk about this because I don't, but that FTX, like he literally owned a casino where he could legally allow people to 100x and had free money and still somehow blew up tens of billions of dollars. Is it greed? Are these people? I don't think that Barry's stupid. I don't think that Sam was necessarily stupid. Like it's free money. All they have to do is run straight up legitimate businesses, and it's literally free billions.
I don't know per se.
Hubris?
I think it's probably greed that gets them over their skis, and then once they're over their skis, the decisions are locked in. So like with Sam, I think Sam was. I've been told at least that Alameda was a Ponzi scheme way back in the day, and FTX was like a way to bail out Alameda. So for him, it's probably like, you got to keep perpetuating the scheme because you got to keep making up for past mistakes. For Barry, it's not dissimilar in the sense of like, okay, I'm sure now if he didn't have the issues he was dealing with at Genesis and at DCG, and it was like all this litigation can go away, the SEC can go away, Gary Gensler can go away, and all you need to do is cut fees from 2 to 1% and open up redemptions partially for a finite amount of time, he would do it. It's now he's just stuck. He can't do it. And so, I think there's some of that, but like at the end of the day, like that's not the victim's problem. That's your problem. And like
100%. Yeah.
So yeah. I don't know, man. It's a tale of old time in Bitcoin. It's like,
and in chapter 11, it seems like it is the customer's problem because we get to pay for all the lawyers, right? So that's right. The problem is like, that's your problem, not the customer's. Well, actually, when you watch half the money disappear into the lawyer's pockets.
Yeah, someone needs to tokenize a law firm, like a bankruptcy firm, and Seriously. Then that way everyone can speculate on all the payouts from the estates after that.
I would totally do that. The outright winners of everything that's happened are bankruptcy attorneys.
Yeah.
Those dudes are killing it. I had this guy on recently who was kind of a Celsius whistleblower, and he was like, I've been trying to get 4 million back from Celsius, and Celsius has spent more than 4 million fighting me on the 4 million that I'm trying to get back from Celsius. Jason Stone.
Yeah. Dude, these guys are good. I mean, like if they just got in our industry and actually worked on industry, they would excel, because we clearly have no fucking clue what we're doing as like amateur entrepreneurs, and these guys are just sharks. So anyway.
Man, I love what you guys are doing. I really hope that the GBTC thing gets sorted. Where can people A, follow you, and B, get some tickets?
Yeah,
so we can get that to 13,300 people or something.
Let's go. So you can follow me on Twitter, David F. Bailey. RedeemGBTC.com is the best place to get updates on that campaign. And go to b.tc/conference to sign up for the conference, see who's speaking, see the agenda and the content. Scott, do you have a referral code?
I don't, but maybe I'll get one in time or something.
Yeah, you should score one. But
everybody's always like, I don't know. I just want them to buy a ticket. Just go, man. Get there.
Scott's referral code, you get an extra 10% off. So there you go.
Oh, well, if I get people some money off, I'll do it. I don't want to get paid though. It's fine.
Cool. Well, Scott, thanks for having me on, and look forward to seeing you in Miami.
Absolutely, man. See you soon.
Cool. Ciao.
That's dope.